You know, I'm supposed to be recording game demos for the Steam Next Fest that's coming up next week and recording them to start making my coverage for them. I'm really excited to do that. And yet, for some reason, the thing I wanted to interrupt my day for right now was to talk about why time passes as you get older. This is something I have struggled with a ton, like pretty consistently. It has really messed with my head. And I feel like once you start understanding why, it starts to feel a little better, and you can leverage that to then help yourself process things a little more smoothly. You see, time is not exactly a linear thing as you experience it. When you experience it, your first few years of your life, like your first year of your life, that first year is 100% of your life. When you are 5 years old, 1 year is 20% of your life. By the time you're 50 years old, a year is 2% of your life. As you live more, each chunk of time becomes, objectively, in terms of measurement of time, less and less significant. The time you spend day to day is worth a lot less now than when you were a kid. And every day was a new adventure and everything was new and exciting because you hadn't experienced that much yet. Another factor that goes into it is that we hang on to memories of doing new things, whether it's discovering a new favorite kind of game to play, to keep it relevant to this channel, or it's discovering a new way to play, finding a new group of friends to play with, new favorites, new modes, getting new hardware. When we're doing something new, it feels fresh and it anchors in our memory more, whereas repeat experiences don't actually build up and stick around for that much longer. And I hadn't really thought about that a whole lot until I started going back through some of my older videos, and I realized that that really does apply to me. If I look back at some of my older content on channels that are not this one, I was making videos on every free-to-play first-person shooter, whatever, and I wouldn't have even known that I had played most of them because I didn't really remember them. My core, like formative, and those formative memories are important, my formative gaming memories for multiplayer shooters, as an example, it's not the most important genre, obviously, but as an example, are Halo 3, a little bit of Halo 2 split screen, Halo CE Online, Combat Arms, Call of Duty. As I start digging, I can start naming more of those, but those big ones, and very cliche, I'm not going to pretend they're not, are the ones that were formative for me, that like truly stuck out as unique experiences. And those were because I was doing something, whether it was playing online for the first time, like with Halo CE or Combat Arms, or playing with friends super competitively, like with Halo 3 and COD 4, they're attached to new anchor experiences. Whereas every little free-to-play shooter, every little other shooter, even, for example, Gears of War, which I played Horde mode and the co-ops with my dad, and I have formative memories of that, but I forgot how much time I actually spent playing online multiplayer, and even Horde mode, in Gears of War 2 and 3. I played them with friends, it was whatever. I enjoyed it. I can look back on it and be like, yeah, that was fun, I kind of miss it. But it doesn't come up in my head as like this core, super important thing because it was kind of a repeat experience from those other formative experiences. Same thing with Pokemon games. I have huge memories of the first 3 generations of Pokemon, especially because I got them kind of condensed. I was a little late to the party there. I have huge memories of these core experiences with these Pokemon games. And while I put tons of time into basically every game since then, I don't remember them anywhere near as much. I don't hold them anywhere near as fondly up until X and Y, which is where I did my first big Let's Play when my main YouTube channel was actually a Pokemon themed YouTube channel for a little while. And like I did all this fundraising to get a 3DS capture card. And that was like a whole big, super important event for me. And I was tied into it was just a big deal for me. Whereas the other games were just games. They were just repeat experiences. They were nothing new. I went back on my Switch. I think this has been a year or two ago now. I went back on my Switch and cleared out all of my captures because I was saving video clips and started trying out some of my older Pokemon games. And I realized I had Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. I remember playing through Let's Go because I streamed it. I remember Sword and Shield because it was kind of a big new thing. And then I remember liking Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, whichever one of those I played. I was always keeping one for a second playthrough or for my wife to play or whatever. I remembered having fun with it, but then I quickly kind of bounced on, at least I thought, to Arceus, and then really didn't like that and kind of fizzled out. I went back and put in, I think it was Shining Pearl, and turns out I actually had completed the game pretty much. I had played a ton and just had forgotten about it because I was just doing it. My kid was a baby at the time, so like I was just kind of chilling on my Switch on dad duty, and it was a repeat experience. And I've talked over on the Dual-Com podcast about the significance, the importance, the value we need to place on mid games that are not these big mountaintop life-changing experiences, but that are still fun and still fill our time for a hobby of playing games. And I do think they are important. I think a lot of games feel more forgettable because they aren't something new, but not every game can be this groundbreaking, genre-defining thing because that would just be exhausting anyway. Our brains really anchor on to change and to formative experiences, which means your first time doing things. If you doing things a certain way. If you are not changing a whole lot in your life, if you are not doing new things on the regular, if you're not evolving as a person and changing and growing, if you have like a 5-10 year stretch where you're at the same job, you're living the same lifestyle, you're doing the same kinds of things, you're not really doing a whole lot different, those years are going to fly by because your brain is not processing any of it as significant time progression, because not a whole lot is changing, not a whole lot is different. There's not a lot to hold on to because it is repeat memories that get condensed a lot. And I think one final factor that kind of plays a role in it is that we condense our memories. The memories are kind of logarithmic in a way. We remember almost everything. Maybe not fine details, but we remember the high level of just about everything. But the longer we live and the more like we experience as we go along the progression of time, the things we have experienced and remember get squished more and more. And so I remember my first date with my wife. I remember getting married with my wife. I remember having a kid with my wife. I remember playing Mario Kart for the first time with my wife. That last one happened 2 months ago. They all start to feel like yesterday, so to speak. There's so much that goes into building up those memories. And as you start to condense years, decades together compared to what the short amount of time that has come since, they start to feel not so far apart. That's why some of us, as a 90s kid, I will say, I was starting to misspeak here because of this kind of behavior. I see the 90s as 10 years ago, 70s, 30 years ago, 80s, 20 years ago, because my formative experiences learning about time and decades and generational differences in the 2000s when I was like 10 or so, because that's when I was really starting to understand those relationships and how that kind of stuff works. And at that point in time, the 90s were 10 years ago, the 80s were 20 years ago. And so like that anchored in me and that hasn't fully changed. The 2000s were 20 years ago. Halo 3 almost came out 20 years ago. That breaks my brain. I still remember being at high school. I don't remember any of the other petty stuff I had going on, but I remember everyone who started playing Halo 3 early and being so jealous, getting it Christmas Day, playing it with my buddy split screen. Like, and that feels like maybe a few months ago. It was long enough, like it starts to feel that way. But anything with my wife, prior to having a kid, it felt like we had such a long life before we had a kid because we, like, the kid years start to get squished and we had so much time together before having a kid. But in reality, we've barely been together. Like the time we were together before we had a kid, every day is getting like we are almost even pre-kid and post-kid now. And we're about to pass over that threshold where we've had a kid longer, but it feels like so much time existed before. And that's just how our brains process. One of the things you can do is to journal your games. If you're specifically wanting to remember games, obviously this is not just broader life advice. I am not here for that sort of thing. But if you're wanting to remember games more, if you want your gaming life as it relates to gaming to feel like it lasts longer, to preserve those memories to feel better, journaling is the answer to most things in life. And this applies to bigger life memories and stuff too. But specifically with games, when you start trying new games, things that stick out, take little notes. There's something called a commonplace book that I try to keep. I have a whole video on my main channel about my like 3 notebook structure I keep. It's not super, I don't like big complex systems. It's not super complicated like that, but I do have like a to-do notebook and then like a scratch pad notebook for all of the things I write down. And I will write thoughts on shows we watch, movies we watch, games we watch. I don't do it all the time. Can't keep up with it always, but I also have a dedicated games notebook. And since I cover games on the channel, I'm leveraging it professionally here as well, which makes it a little easier. But just, it can be as simple as mini reviews, and you can do this on a site like Backlogged or your Steam reviews or something too, and then you can look back through that over time, or you can write it just for yourself. And it can be as involved as like a mini review, or it can just be notes on what you did in that session. Like, I love finding in my game cases, in my old game cases, I love finding printouts of like cheats or guides that I did from GameFAQs back in the day, and sometimes they still have the date attached because certain browsers printed the date when you print files. I love going back and seeing that. I love seeing the sticky notes I wrote for myself of like objectives I was working towards and where I was at with those, because I have trouble remembering that, especially with big gaps in between playing. You could do just notes on what you are trying to keep up with, task tracking basically, so that you know what's going on. You can keep ongoing lists of games you want to play and games you've already tried or backed out of or whatever. Or you could even straight up just log like your experiences every session and like write it like a diary basically as you are the character or something. There's a lot of different things you can do there. I personally like writing notes on how I feel about a game, the frustrations I run into, whether those kind of become a moot point as the game progresses, questions I might have about it, things like that. And again, that informs my game review and games coverage process, but it also helps me look back and be like, oh yeah, that one was great. I can go back and see that, because often when I go to do like end of the year conversations with people and we talk about the games we play and stuff, I don't even remember everything I've played in a year. And so this kind of journaling process, again, I don't like getting super scientific with it, so I'm keeping it high level and free form, but that kind of process helps me process and remember a lot better. Getting older is hard. I've got a lot of like gut stuff I'm taking care of right now and got to have some procedures done and change up my diet and some medicine and some fun stuff there. And life, bills, groceries are super expensive. Life just keeps going on. But it is possible to hold on to those memories and to really like be okay with the progress of time. But it requires doing new things more often than you're probably used to and keeping track of what you're doing, because I may not remember every game. Like there's one, it was called like Urban Terror Corruption that I played. It was like a free-to-play shooter I played back in like 2011 or something. It was not a memorable game. It was not a fun game. It was just a free-to-play shooter. I would not have even begun to tell you that I even knew what that game was or I ever played it. But going back and watching my video on it, seeing the thoughts I had at the time, and most of my thoughts weren't even relevant to the game, but it had the gameplay, and then hearing my thoughts, that primed me to put me back in that position to remember, oh yeah. And that kind of fills out my memory gaps for that point in time. A journal will do the same thing. It will help prime you. You're not going to remember every detail, every single thing, and journaling it yourself will boost your memory, but it's the going back and reflecting on it every once in a while, just kind of thumbing through the pages instead of doom scrolling, has massive benefits for your mental health and for memory. Just wanted to share some thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Remember to be kind, rewind. And if I include this camera angle, let me know what you think about it.